Let me start with a question. If the city you live in vanished tomorrow, what would remain for someone to find 1,000 years from now? The answer is already under your feet. Because whether you live in Istanbul, Mexico City, London, Rome, or a quiet town with a very old church and a strangely high sidewalk, we are already walking across the roofs of older worlds. We live on the ruins of the ancient world, not metaphorically, but physically. The modern city is a stack, and our floor is not the first one laid. Cities don't replace themselves the way forests do. Forests burn, then regrow from soil raw and new. Cities burn, flood, crumble, and then we build on top, using the old as foundation, filler, or a forgettable basement. This is why front doors in medieval streets sometimes open onto staircases that plunge down to a doorway buried a story below the sidewalk. It's why basements in some neighborhoods have windows that stare into earth. It's why archaeologists talk about cultural layers as if a city were a cake. Today, we'll explore 3 hooks that make this idea vivid: buried floors, underground cities, and sudden cultural layers that feel like catastrophe. And we'll ask what this vertical city does to our sense of time. Start with the humble doorway. In Rome, you can visit the medieval church of San Clemente. Step inside, and you'll feel the timeline tilt. Beneath the 12th century church is a 4th century church. Beneath that, a 1st century Mithraic shrine. 3 stories of worship, one stacked on another, and the oldest is now underground, simply because time dropped silt, floods rose, rubble filled, and people wanted flat floors again. This isn't just Rome. In Istanbul, street level climbed over centuries of fires, earthquakes, and rebuilding. In many historic neighborhoods, you can find ground floor shops with ceilings suspiciously low, or doors that used to be ground level but now open onto a waist-high wall. The city rose, the door sank. And then there's London's Mithraeum, a Roman temple to Mithras lost beneath the financial district. When it was rediscovered during 20th century construction, it hadn't teleported. It was exactly where it had always been. It's the surface that moved grain by grain, brick by broken brick, lifted by flood deposits, demolition fill, and centuries of resurfacing streets. Why do floors get buried? Think sediment and reuse. Ancient streets, especially in river cities, received regular doses of silt from floods. After fires or sieges, rubble was swept into low spots or used as fill. When wood decayed, when walls collapsed, when civic projects regraded a slope, the ground climbed never dramatically in a day, but relentlessly over lifetimes. If you wanted to raise a flood-prone neighborhood, the cheapest way was to dump yesterday's broken city under tomorrow's market square. The street got higher. The old doorway went dark. If you've ever wondered why basements have vaulted brick ceilings in some old quarters, consider this. Those were once open-air arches, later entombed when the street above was lifted. You are walking across yesterday's skyline. Sometimes the old city isn't just below. The city below is intentional. In central Turkey, under the volcanic landscapes of Cappadocia, entire underground cities such as Derinkuyu and Kaymak descend like beehives into the earth. These were not basements in our sense. They were layered sanctuaries. People carved kitchens, stables, sleeping chambers, wineries, and churches into soft tuff, complete with rolling stone doors that sealed tunnels. They could hide thousands of people for weeks. The city below here is not an accident of time, it's an architecture of survival. Seattle offers a different, more recent example. After an 1889 fire destroyed much of the downtown, the city rebuilt a level higher to fix chronic flooding and sewage problems. Streets were regraded upward by as much as 22 feet. For a time, pedestrians walked on elevated sidewalks while shopkeepers still used their ground floors below. Eventually, the lower level was sealed and dimmed. Today, Seattle's underground is a guided tour through what used to be the city's daylight. In Paris, the underground is a mirror of the above ground. Quarries, catacombs, sewers, and the metro. The catacombs, filled with millions of human bones relocated from overcrowded cemeteries in the 18th and 19th centuries, are not a ruin in the usual sense, but a restacked city of the dead. A stone that built Parisian boulevards was quarried beneath them. Walk a Paris street and you stand on the source of its own walls. Underground city is not just romance. It's infrastructure. Subways and service tunnels, culverted rivers, service corridors, and sky-blue water mains, then older brick sewers beneath. A city is nested architecture. Sometimes the deepest level is ancient. Sometimes the deepest level is the newest steel rails and cables punched through old clay and medieval refuse. Either way, the vertical image persists. We live in one layer, aware or unaware of the others. Most layers accumulate slowly, but some arrive all at once. Archaeologists call them event deposits, an ash blanket from a volcano, a tsunami sand sheet, a citywide demolition layer after an invasion or after urban renewal. Pompeii is the emblem. Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, and the lethal mix of falling pumice and pyroclastic flows froze the city in a few hours. Walk the streets today, and you can see bread in ovens, graffiti on walls, a dog's chain coiled against stone. It feels like a catastrophe pressed pause on a civilization and left a cast for us to pour plaster into. Another Bronze Age city, Acroterion Santorini, was similarly sealed by an earlier eruption, a frescoed world held in volcanic chalk. But sudden layer doesn't have to mean lava. In the Near East, Tell's mounds formed by millennia of occupation sometimes reveal black bands of burned debris. A city fell in a night, then ash became a line on the stratigraphy. In England, the Great Fire Layer from 1666 is a widespread horizon of charcoal and melted pottery across London's archaeological record. There are modern sudden layers, too, created not by disaster but by decision. In the 19th century, Baron Haussmann's redesign of Paris cut boulevards through dense medieval streets. Debris became fill elsewhere. In many cities, 20th century slum clearance created new, flat platforms for highways and towers. The effect is the same on the ground. An abrupt horizon, a line that says, before this, one world, after this, another. This is the feeling I want to put words to. You look at a single band of ash or a single buried street, and it seems like an entire layer of civilization was wiped clean in an instant. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's how we interpret a long story compressed into a thin layer. Either way, the sensation is of standing above a vanished city you can almost touch. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a river city. Year 0, a market square lies a little above the river. Timber-framed buildings line a dirt street. Year 10, a flood leaves 2 inches of silt. People shovel doorways clear, but the street is now slightly higher. Year 35, a fire destroys 1 block. Rubble fills cellars and smooths the street. New structures go up on the compacted debris. Year 60, the city paves the road with stone. A flat surface demands flat thresholds. Owners add steps up from their now lower floors or raise their interiors to match. Year 120, another flood, another inch or 2 of silt. The city adds new paving on top rather than peeling off the old. The curb grows taller. Year 200, sewers are installed. To get the right slope, the street is raised. Basement windows become coal chutes. What used to be ground floors become basements. Year 350, a planner straightens the street and levels the slope. Retaining walls hold in new fill. Sidewalks ride higher. The old street, locked below, dry and forgotten. Multiply this by neighborhoods and centuries. Add the habit of using ruins as quarries for new building stone, and you have the vertical city we live in, Rome, layers on layers. Forums turned into cow pastures in the Middle Ages, then buried under debris, then re-excavated as the birth of archaeology. The Colosseum's arena floor? Below the modern gaze, the hypogeum tunnels and cages was a basement even in antiquity. Mexico City. The Templo Mayor of the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, lay under the colonial city for centuries, parceled and built over. Excavations in the late 20th century revealed offerings, serpents carved in stone, layers of ritual construction, each Aztec phase built atop the previous now beneath asphalt and offices. London. The city's Roman layer sits meters down roads, mosaics, the Walbrook Stream culvert. The Great Fire Horizon is a black seam at 17th century depth. On top of that, the Victorians erased and rewrote ground levels when they modernized sewers, then raised embankments along the Thames. Istanbul. Constantine's city is threaded with Byzantine cisterns, many now under shops and streets. The Basilica cistern with its forest of columns. Above them, Ottoman neighborhoods rose and burned and rose again, each reconstruction packing the ground a little higher. Naples, the Greco-Roman aqueducts and tufa quarries became World War II air raid shelters. Today, guides lower you into a subterranean mirror of the old city water channels, cisterns, staircases under the grid of Spanish quarters. Jerusalem, a city of vertical truths. Streets from the Roman era lie beneath medieval souk. Tunnels along the western wall show stones placed by Herodian builders, now far below modern pavement. In each city, the past is repeatedly reused, and when reuse is impractical, we bury and build. There's a peculiar emotion that cultural layers provoke. You stand at the edge of a trench and see bright pottery above, bright pottery below, and between them a thin blackness char. It looks like a night that never ended. It feels as if a whole world ended in a breath. Sometimes it did. A volcanic ash layer that stretches across a region is a synchronized clock hand. But sometimes the feeling of catastrophe comes from compression. Decades of decline and repair can shrink into one dirty, compacted seam, and our eyes read suddenness because the layer is thin. A sudden cultural layer can be a psychological effect. Thinness equals instantness. Archaeology makes us more careful. We ask, was it a night of fire or a generation of neglect? Either way, the vertigo is real. We are up here on the fresh pavement. They are down there, just an arm's reach into the past, inhabiting kitchens that still smell of smoke when the earth opens. Living above ruins shapes memory. Legends often begin in basements. A saint's bones under the altar, a hidden synagogue beneath a house, a tunnel that leads to the castle. Sometimes the legend is true in spirit. There's a Roman road beneath. There's also the ethics of building on bones. When we treat the past as fill, we risk flattening more than topography. But when we treat it as sacred, we risk turning cities into museums. The vertical city asks for balance. Keep the subway moving. Keep the door open to the older room. And maybe most of all, it asks humility. We are not the first floor. We are just the current one. You don't need a ruin to see the stack. Here's how to read it where you live. Look for doors below sidewalks. A window half buried is a past ground floor. Check churchyards and old civic buildings. Are there thresholds far above the street? The ground rose around them. Find sudden steps inside old shops. An interior slope often marks where a new street level forced a floor lift. Trace old waterways on maps. Culverted streams are often under odd street curves or long, narrow parks. And when you pass a construction pit, look at the walls. Bands of color, debris, and soil are the city's barcode. Every city has a stratigraphy. Learning to read, it is learning to feel time in the solace of your shoes. We live on the ruins of the ancient world, and the future will live on ours. Someday, someone will descend into a cooled subway tunnel, find the tiled station name, and run a gloved hand across a timetable frozen in dust. They will say, look, the moment when cars dipped underground, when people poured through this artery. They might call our present a sudden layer, a century of combustion turned into a thin seam of soot. Between the buried floors, the underground cities, and the thin lines of catastrophe, a pattern emerges. People endure by stacking. We choose to rise rather than scrape everything away, and that choice makes time legible in cross-section. So the next time you step down into a basement cafe, pause on the last stair. Imagine that once this doorway opened to the sun. Imagine that the table where you sit was once a courtyard where a child chased a dog. Imagine that one day your favorite street will be a cool, dark room. Someone will stand there and feel what you feel now, the presence of another floor of life, just out of reach, still warm in the earth. We are the latest layer. Build wisely. Thank you for watching.